What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that is Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
What's happening, man? I mean, always excited for these Thursday shows. Kind of on the edge of my seat now because the way that we're doing the rapid fire, where we always end with this like either or question where you're kind of doing like, I think, a science experiment. You're like trying to test like the depths of my competitiveness when it comes to that accuracy contest. So we'll see what you come up with this time, man. But I can report, like, right now, it's all working out. Right now, I am in third out of 160-something analysts in the contest.
Oh, let's go.
Got a legitimate shot to potentially bring it home for a second time here. So very excited about all that. And, man, like, I would say, like, especially these Thursday episodes, but both the shows that we do every week, it helps, man. Like, when we have these conversations, I feel like both of us, but I'll speak for myself, I come away with a new perspective on stuff sometimes, and then I immediately go update the rankings and tweak stuff. So I appreciate you, dude. I appreciate the hard work you're putting in, and looking forward to another show where hopefully I can have a few more tidbits to come out with and update the rankings with.
Yeah, how much of a jackass would I be in for response to all that? I'm like, yeah, I don't feel the same way at all. These conversations don't move me one bit. No, but I really, not for just us, doing like a virtual hug here, but no, I really appreciate working with you too. You've definitely changed a lot of the way I view things, and it's helpful for me to get out of the same circular conversations I feel like I'm having with myself about football all the time. So it has definitely been a big boost, I think, for the both of us, and hopefully, for God's sakes, for the people watching and listening to the show. That would be really nice if they are also taking something out of it, which hopefully all of you guys are out there. With that, let's get into today's show because it is a big one here. It's the Week 11 preview, as we always do on these preview shows. First two segments, that is dominated by Boone's 6-pack of questions for each week's slate of games. Segment number 3, that's literally no one's games of the week. I pick 3 games that are not headlines by any means, but you need to care about these lovable little freak shows for fantasy football. And then segment 4, as Boone was talking about, that's the hurry up offense where we try to get each other to answer some rapid fire questions in 40 seconds or less. With that, let's dive into Boone's 6-pack of questions. That little pop top always gets me in the mood to talk some ball here. So, Boone, let's get into your first question, which revolves around certainly what I think is the game of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to start off with this one. Seahawks, Rams. And I just want to know, can the Seahawks slow down Matthew Stafford and this Rams offense? Like, Stafford is playing quarterback about as well as you can play quarterback lately. Like, just an elite clip here. He's thrown for 3 touchdowns or more in 5 of his last 6 games. Been a top 8 fantasy quarterback in each of those 5 outings. 20 touchdowns to 0 interceptions in his last 6 appearances. And now he is the new MVP favorite. As you can see there, he's slightly edging out Drake May in the latest odds. But also, I will point out, as I tend to, the schedule has been pretty easy, right? From week 4 on, that's when he really got hot. He played the banged up Colts defense, the 49ers who were banged up, the Ravens who were banged up, the Jags who obviously you can get over on, the Saints, and then an even more banged up Niners team a second time. So the 2 hardest matchups that he's faced this year were the Texans in week 1 and the Eagles in week 3. And in those contests, the numbers weren't as good, right? QB 14, QB 20. The Seahawks definitely offer a tough challenge here. I don't know if it's quite as tough as those other defenses I just mentioned, but definitely a tough challenge. They haven't let anybody throw for 3 touchdowns against them. So right there, we'll see if Stafford can keep that streak going. But through the air really seems to be the better way to attack them because they're so tough against the run. They're allowing the 3rd fewest rushing yards, the 4th fewest rushing touchdowns. Stafford's going to have to make something happen here. He definitely can, and I think Vegas assumes that he can because we got a 48.5 projected point total. It's one of the highest on the week. The Rams are favored by 3.5. They have the 7th highest implied total on the week. So we're really expecting some points in this one, even though we do have 2 pretty good defenses here. I will also say the Rams are 5-0 against the Seahawks when Stafford has started. So that's something to note here. He has been really good against this team. I don't know that, I'm expecting much more than what he did in his only game against them last year, which he had 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. Like I said, I don't know that we can continue this 3, 4, 5 touchdown streak going. That's a pretty tough ask, but could be more of a low end QB1 maybe in this contest, but still a guy that I think you're just going to continue to start because he has been fantastic, even though the matchup is going to be a little bit harder in this one.
Yeah, in the league where I've been riding Matthew Stafford as my QB1, I'm definitely playing him again this week. So, matchup be damned. I'm definitely going to roll him out there. And it's funny, again, talking about the influence I think we've had on each other since we've started working together. You constantly, and I say this with love, you constantly bringing up the schedule for all of these players has definitely been a little bit of an unlock for me, because I tend to sometimes, both looking forward and looking back, sometimes for me in the inverse, like looking back, I tend to almost just kind of, once it's happened, and it's part of the story of the season. But you also forget the context of what those matchups were. And part of me, I was actually thinking about what I just said, how much you bring up the schedule. And I was thinking to myself as I was putting together this wide receivers article that I just published today. We're reading again in 2025, folks, if you didn't know, just how much, with I always say the wide receiver is so volatile, right? It's so up and down. It's like these pockets of the season. And part of me was thinking, these pockets of the season, ultimately, especially for individual offenses, they can just be dictated by who did they play. And the numbers in the aggregate end up being great. And that doesn't mean we need to diminish players or, they just played a bunch of crappy teams. Well, if you dunk on crappy teams, that is still a skill, okay? That is not to diminish the players by any means, but I think it ultimately can dictate these narratives to the point that now, we have these really high expectations for Stafford and this Rams offense. And I do still think this can be a good offensive showing, but I'm not necessarily penciling in the same type of production we've seen from Stafford out of what we've seen from him in some of these games against what, to me, is the best defense in the NFL. I actually wouldn't be surprised, Boone, if this ends up being a little bit of a lower scoring game, because I think the Rams on the other side of it, while the Seahawks have just been so unstoppable on offense, I think their defense up front can give a Seahawks offensive line that is dealing with injuries at center. Their right guard has been a mess all season long. I think we could see some real interior pressure kind of disrupt Sam Darnold and kind of mess up the rhythm of that offense on the other side of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see this game going either way. Both offenses have been really, really good this year, and I think we're going to see this game play at a fairly quick clip, which means there's going to be a lot of chances for points, a lot of chances for scoring. I find it really interesting too. I don't know how much you've looked into this, but like how much the Rams have started using 13 personnel, and they have like 4 tight ends. We would love for fantasy.
Looked into it.
We would love for fantasy nothing more than them to just have like one guy. I don't care if it's Tyler Higbee. I don't care if it's Terrence Ferguson, the rookie, who I think a lot of people are excited about, especially in Dynasty. Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen. They have these 4 guys. And they've all like weirdly produced for fantasy this year. It's just been like very, very hard to project because it'll be Higbee getting a decent amount of yards, but then Davis Allen will score the touchdown, right? Colby Parkinson will get a touchdown. Terrence Ferguson will make the explosive play downfield. And they continue to do this. Like the last 3 weeks, especially, they have started to run 13 personnel a ton. And it's been like this really weird wrinkle that you didn't necessarily expect from McVay, who traditionally, I think we got pretty used to him having 11 personnel out there, right? But they're kind of throwing this at defenses, and it's thrown some people for a loop, and the offense is crushing it because they have the 2 great receivers. They're mixing in these tight end packages. It's really interesting to see, even though for fantasy, like I said, it's not resulting in any sort of tight end we can play. We just keep coming back to Stafford, 2 wideouts, and then the backfield where it's obviously Kyron Williams and Blake Corum is somebody who we can continue to bring up. The waiver wire column, I wrote about him in deep stashes, still under 15% rostered somehow, Harmon. I don't know what we got to do to get people to go pick this guy up, but if he's out there on the waiver wire in your league, make sure you are stashing him because you can almost use him, maybe not in this matchup because it will be a little tougher, like I said, on the ground, but you can almost use him as a flex. But let's go back to the tight end thing because I'm sure you got something you want to say about that.
Yeah, we showed the tweet earlier that the Rams have used 13 personnel in the last 4 weeks on 40% of their snaps. 40% is outrageous. The next highest team is the Steelers. Of course it is the Steelers and Arthur Smith at 18%. And they lead the league in EPA per play out of this package. And just again, in case you are totally unfamiliar, 13 personnel means 1 back, 3 tight ends on the field. So there's a little bit of a ripple effect here. You mentioned Terrence Ferguson, the rookie tight end there. He's been really integral to this in terms of being a guy. And I don't know if you remember when he was drafted, there was that video that came out of McVay talking to Les Snead in the draft room just about how he had to have this guy. He was so obsessed with him. And just watching them use this personnel grouping, you can really see it because, one, Ferguson has had, I think, just the last 2 weeks, 2 catches for 68 yards when they're in 13 personnel. So, again, that's not great for us for fantasy. It's not a lot of volume, but it's these big plays that do trickle back into Stafford. And I think this is part of why Stafford's been such a great fantasy quarterback, but also because he can run true clear out routes. He can actually clear space because he moves so well. I have him on one dynasty team and I'm so excited. It is my Tucker Kraft dynasty team. So I kind of wish it was happening right now just because Kraft is gone, but it's not happening right now. So nevertheless, yeah, let's get it going, Rams. Come on,
let's go, McVay. Come on.
But nevertheless, yeah, he's still really integral because he can clear out some space for some of the guys underneath, which is why you've seen Parkinson have big plays. I will say just one interesting note. Talked a little bit about this with Ray earlier in the week, I believe, but I did mention in the wide receiver piece because Puka, of course, was wide receiver 1 overall in weeks 1 to 5. Weeks 6 to 10, he's wide receiver 17 in points per game. Most of that is, of course, because he's been dealing with injuries. Naturally, that's going to just mess up per game stuff. But also, he has run zero routes when they get into 13 personnel, and they're using it at such a high rate. It is at least worth wondering if that shaves off some of his weekly ceiling. I'm not saying like let's panic about Puka Nacua or anything, but Devontae Adams is usually the ISO wide receiver. He's caught 2 touchdowns out of 13 personnel the last 2 weeks. He's usually the ISO wide receiver. If not, it's this guy Xavier Smith, who I don't know anything about Xavier Smith. Maybe they like him as a blocker or something like that, but he's been out there as the ISO receiver in these situations. So if they're going to use so much of this 13 personnel and Puka's coming off the field for a handful of routes a game, it is just worth wondering if now a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba is just going to run away with wide receiver 1 overall honors, or Jamar Chase passes him up after what we saw in the first block of the season.
Yeah, it doesn't change too much for like fantasy managers because obviously you're never taking Puka out of your lineup. But yeah, it's more of a projection thing, right? That's more something. There you go for the rankings contest. Do we maybe move Puka down a spot or two some weeks because that could potentially be the case? I also think it's really funny, like to look at. Shout out to JB Long, who's the play-by-play voice for the Rams. He pointed out the Rams tight end room last year for the whole season: 83 targets, 51 catches, 359 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This year, in just 8 games, 70 combined targets, 50 catches, 518 yards already, and 7 touchdowns already. So just a ton of production coming from those tight ends. But again, unfortunately, hard to really turn that into much for fantasy at the moment because you can't really project which one of these guys is going to come through. I will also say, because I bring these kind of things up all the time too, Cooper Kupp revenge game? I don't really think so, but I feel like we have to mention it here, right? He kind of dismissed it, right? He really didn't seem like he wanted to lean into that, like Aaron Rodgers style, where Rodgers just more than willing to admit it. But 2 for 74 last week from Kupp, but he played a season low 53% of the snaps, and he was coming back from injury. Of course, they get Rashid Shaheed, so that factors into everything here. He's only top 10 fantasy points twice in half PPR this season, though, so we might bump him up a couple spots, but you're not really playing Kupp unless you're fairly desperate. He's just like a wide receiver 4 flex option at best, I think.
I like how the Seahawks media asked him about how he felt about returning to LA, and I think they asked him. They might have asked him if the Rams are planning to do a tribute video, or they are going to do a tribute video for him when he's in the stadium, and he said, kind of weird, I'm not dead, I'm right here. I thought that was funny. I appreciated that line from Cooper Kupp, but I'm also just curious if we see more Rashid Shaheed in this matchup as well. I don't think he's at a point where you can play him in fantasy, but he did have success against this Rams defense not too long ago when he was a member of the New Orleans Saints. And I think he matches up well with some of those corners from a speed perspective. He can get separation on these guys. So if you have Shaheed, you're stashing him away on your bench. I think you're hoping to see him play a little bit more when he was not involved in 2 receiver sets last week. And that's just going to be the interesting thing with both of these teams. Just the personnel groupings. Just the last note on that from me is that the Seahawks, at least, they're one of these teams that just play their guys. And that's the whole point, which is ironic because when they've used so much heavy personnel, 2 tight ends, 13 personnel, whatever, teams have consistently then matched them with their base defense, which is why they've been able to have these huge plays to Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Sam Darnold is just ripping heater after heater. The Seahawks on the other side of it, they just match you in nickel every time because they have Nick Emanwari, who's can like moonlight as a cover corner / linebacker. So really interesting schematic matchup. And again, this is where I come back to thinking that I mean, you're going to play your guys in fantasy who you have here, but I do wonder, and maybe I look like a complete idiot, but I wonder if this just ends up being kind of a lower scoring game where we have it's a great football game, but we have some, maybe fantasy disappointments, quote unquote, in this one.
I really hope that's not the case, Harmon. We want to see some points in that game, and we want to see some points in the next game that I want to talk about as well. So I don't know if we want to move on to that here. All right, so we want to highlight, obviously, the big games every week, and we're talking about this. We want to highlight them from a fantasy perspective. We have the Eagles and the Lions facing off here in Philly, and I want to know, I'm very curious to hear what you got to say about this one. Is there any hope here for A.J. Brown and this Eagles passing attack in this game and the rest of the way, right? And by now, I'm sure everyone has seen his comments. There you go for everyone watching. They're up on the screen. He said a few different things, but it came down to, quote, "If you got me on fantasy, get rid of me," end quote. He was playing Madden. He also said, the only highlights of the damn football season I've been living right now, suggesting that they were on Madden. It's just kind of the latest in him giving comments like this, sulking on the bench, on the sidelines during games. It's been such like a weird season for him. And the question now is he totally right? Like, is he saying this because he sees no hope whatsoever? There's no light at the end of the tunnel. This is just the way it's going to be for him. Or could we potentially see something change? And I don't know if it's going to be a squeaky wheel situation because this isn't the first time he's done this. So I don't think we could just immediately go, okay, he's unhappy. They're going to go out of their way to help him out. That has not been the case. That has not been happening. This is a receiver who, for his 3 full seasons in Philly, he's averaged over 87 receptions, over 1,300 yards, and over 8 touchdowns per year. Like, this is a guy that has been a massive difference maker in real life and fantasy. And I know this isn't the same Eagles offense. They're down to 25th in passing yards per game, 23rd in total offense per game. However, Harmon, am I crazy to think that we might see a little improvement from him and from maybe this entire offense, but especially from this passing attack down the stretch? Because they get the Lions this week. Then they get the Cowboys, the Bears, the Chargers, the Raiders, the Commanders, and the Bills. That's the rest of the fantasy season for them here. That's including the fantasy playoffs, of course. So hopefully everyone makes it there to take advantage of some of those matchups. But 5 of the next 6 opponents are top 10 in terms of fantasy points allowed to receivers. Lions are 8th, Cowboys are 1st, Bears are 4th. And then in the first 2 weeks of the fantasy playoffs, it's the Raiders who are 6th. It's the Commanders who are 2nd. And, we can't just point to that because he's had 2 games where he's played top 10 easy opponents already. And one of them was the Cowboys in the opener, and he came away with 1 catch for 8 yards. The other was 6 for 80 versus the Giants, which obviously a better performance there, but he didn't find the end zone. And then he didn't play in the second Giants game. He was hurt. But, the thing is, the Lions offense, they can certainly put up points, and that might be something that forces Philly to kind of change some of their approach and maybe throw a little bit more. The Cowboys, the Bears, the Chargers, the Bills in week 17, regardless of being easy matchups or not, those are offenses that I think are going to be able to move the ball and potentially turn these games into high-scoring affairs or shootouts. Could we not see A.J. Brown maybe come alive a little bit in some of those contests? Do you think that could be the case? Or is this just a situation where they're not really getting him easy looks? They're not really giving him what I think you would call like those layup kind of plays. They're not doing that for him. And maybe this attitude that he's had all year just reflects like that lack of hope that he has that anything's going to change.
Lot to unpack from the
Yeah.
AJ Brown thing and everything you just said there. And it has been almost an exhausting week by week thing where something like this crops up maybe every couple weeks or so. I will say, to answer your overall question, are you crazy to think that he could come alive? No, I don't think you're crazy. Also, because we've seen evidence of it. We've seen evidence of him coming alive. Again, to reference the wide receiver split article I just did, yeah, he was wide receiver 54 in points per game in the first 5 weeks of the season. It's only 3 games because they had their bye and he missed a contest, but he is wide receiver 13 in weeks 6 through 10. He had a solid game against the Giants, 11 fantasy points. He had the blow-up game against the Vikings. And then obviously we are all, including AJ Brown, we are all maybe overreacting to what we just watched on Monday Night Football with this really slow, stagnant Eagles offense in that game there where he had sub 3 fantasy points in that one. And Devontae Smith also has the same splits where he was wide receiver 34 to start the season. He's wide receiver 7 since week 6. So all that to say, would you start AJ Brown in fantasy this week? We asked the chat. No. Did you hear what the man said? Won with 65% of the votes. Yes, I hate myself with 35% of the votes is getting there. And yeah, I mean, listen, I actually think AJ Brown can have a good week this week. Boone, you mentioned this Lions matchup, which, it's not as juicy as some of the other ones that you talked about there, but they play man coverage at the second highest rate in the NFL. And even in this frustrating down season for A.J. Brown, he is still third in the NFL with 3.98 yards per route run against man coverage. And he has always historically smoked man coverage. And I think even if I contend that he is not separating at the same level that he used to, and I still feel that way. I think he has taken a step back. I don't think they're doing him any favors from the structure of the offense, from the way it is designed in terms of getting him, like you said, those layup looks. A lot of those are going to Devontae Smith, which kind of hard to argue that they shouldn't because he has just outplayed A.J. Brown 1-to-1 this season, and he looks like a guy that you would want to feed into and invest to. But even as he's not getting those looks, and he's not separating, he's still great against man coverage because he's still an absolute beast at the catch point, is A.J. Brown. So I actually think this week against this Lions defense, we could see him come alive. And my last point here is just reading between the lines of what A.J. has said since Streamgate and the fantasy, trade me away comments or whatever, when talking to the media. I think he is less frustrated with Jalen Hurts or any of that stuff. And I think he really does not buy into what this offense is doing right now from a design perspective. And I actually agree with him where he said, hey, look, like, thanks for the ring last year, but this is a new season and teams have adjusted to us and we are not adjusting back. And I hear Nick Sirianni say at the podium, we need to avoid turnovers. It's like, okay, sure. Yeah. But you also got to take risks. You got to be aggressive to win some of these football games. So I'm kind of team AJ Brown from that perspective, even if I do think he's taking a little bit of a step back as a player.
The other weird thing is, like, if they are just doing this because they want to limit turnovers and rely on their defense and kind of grind these games out, what happens when they have to actually turn it up in the playoffs? Do they just think like they're so good that at the drop of a hat, they'll just be like, yeah, okay, we'll start chucking the ball downfield and it'll be fine, right? Like, I mean,
like kind of they did in the Rams game, right?
It's true, right? That is the funny thing. Like, they're just that talented that it doesn't even matter. I will also say, too, you brought up Smith. I don't know how you feel about this, but like in my rest of season rankings, I do my trade value charts, my rest of season rankings all in one that comes out every Wednesday. Devonta Smith, 17th, A.J. Brown, 20th right now. And I kind of thought I was still being generous to A.J. Brown by having him that high. But to me, it's no question that Smith is the better fantasy asset the rest of the way and the guy that you want to have. I
think you're maybe a little generous to A.J. Brown and probably not ranking Smith high enough. I think I'd have to sit there and look at the guys you have ahead of him. But on first glance, I think he's probably closer to like top 15 than 17. But I think he's a really interesting dynasty proposition too, because I do wonder if A.J. is just not on the team next year. And Devontae Smith looks like a guy who's perfectly capable of being a wide receiver 1. So, no, yeah, I like it. I definitely think – I said it on the solo recap show for Monday Night Football. Talk about the rankings contest. The first thing I do every time I log into those rankings and I start with the expert consensus, whatever, I'm like, all right, let's go ahead and flop where they have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith because they've got that one backwards all year long. So, yeah, I'm definitely interested to see what this matchup looks like for these wide receivers. And as I mentioned, it's a good coverage-based matchup for AJ Brown. So if you have to start him, you can at least take that as and like I said, he had 2 good games before the bye. I think we're overreacting. I think the floor on AJ Brown is significantly lower, Boone, than we're used to. But I do think that the ceiling remains tantalizing enough that he's probably not going to, that's not what you want when you took him in the 2nd round or something like that. But it still makes him a more viable fantasy receiver, I think, than people are giving him credit for.
I mean, there's a lot of other factors in what I'm about to say, but to give you an idea, I was offered in one league with some other analysts, a single quarterback redraft league. I got offered Drake May for AJ Brown this week, and I decided to hold on to AJ Brown, even though I'm, having some issues at quarterback with injuries, Jaden Daniels being hurt, and yet I was still willing to roll the dice that AJ Brown is going to have some big performances rather than go out and get a guy in Drake May that I think is very rock solid. But at QB, I think it's easier to fill in that kind of value where as long as AJ Brown can give me some of those wide receiver 2 weeks, maybe the odd wide receiver 1 week, if he has some spike performances, like I kind of think he can in some of these games, then I would rather have him in my lineup the rest of the way.
I like it. Yeah, we can be honest about the way AJ has played in isolation this year and still say that he is, I think, getting and him saying trade me away in fantasy, I think maybe it's a little bit of an overreaction. Again, I think both things can be true here. But let's stick at the wide receiver position for your 3rd question of the week.
Yeah, which wide receivers should you be buying before the fantasy trade deadline, which I think in a lot of leagues, the default is next week in week 12. So you got to start thinking about that. Last week on the show, we ended the 6 questions. We ended it with the running backs that I think people should go and trade for. So if you didn't see that, go back, check out that segment because all those guys still stand true as players that I'm trying to go out and trade for. I want to talk about 4 receivers right now that I think you should be trying to make an effort to get on your roster here. And the 4 are Jameson Williams, who is actually going to be on the other side of the field against AJ Brown this week, Zay Flowers, Ricky Pearsall, and then Justin Jefferson, who we talked about on Monday. And I just want to put it down one more time. The more I look at it, Justin Jefferson, maybe Jordan Addison, but give me a second. We'll get there. Let's go through these guys. Okay. So for Jameson Williams, we're seeing him heat up a little bit recently, right? At least 65 yards and a touchdown in 3 of his last 4 games. I know you did some work on Dan Campbell taking over the play calling last week and what that meant for JMO. I think that factors in here for sure. So does the schedule, to keep coming back to schedule stuff. And it's not just opponents like, the Giants in week 12, the Cowboys in week 14, the Steelers in week 16. The Lions have one of the 5 easiest fantasy schedules the rest of the way for receivers based on my strength of schedule work. And I've mentioned it before, the final 6 games that they have, they're going to get back to their bread and butter. They're going to be indoors for all 6 of those games. That tends to be when this passing attack really hits its stride and goes off. So I think it's an offense as a whole that you want to buy into right now. We also have Sam Laporta dealing with a back injury. He's missed practice the first 2 days of this week. Not sure if he's going to play this week. We're going to have to keep an eye on that one. But we talked before the season about all the different hands in this offense that are calling for the ball. Well, if you take away a guy like Laporta, that could certainly mean another target or 2 going to Jameson Williams. So I think that's another reason to consider him here. I would just go out and I would try to buy him because we know the big playability. We've seen him start to come on recently. I'm really excited about him. Zay Flowers, in the 7 games that Lamar has suited up, Flowers has gone for at least 70 yards in 4 of them. I know he's still not finding the end zone at the pace that we would like to see, and I don't want to rely on like he's due, but touchdowns are going to come. He is not going to have a touchdown in week 1 and never find the end zone again for the rest of the season. Knock on wood somewhere, because watch now, he'll go out and do that. But we have Rashad Bateman, who's banged up. He's dealing with an ankle issue. He's not practicing this week. The Ravens have a pretty good schedule the rest of the way, like no particularly tough matchups. And just Flowers is like too involved to not end up being productive at some point. And I think I would argue he has been productive. And if you throw another touchdown or 2 in there, people would be a lot more excited about his fantasy outlook right now. I don't know if it's going to happen this week. So if you're looking to trade for him, maybe you wait until next week, because this week there could be some weather issues in that game with the Browns. I'm not sure if it's going to be like precipitation stuff like snow or rain. I think it might be more a wind issue there. But again, he's the kind of player that could get something in the short range and use his yak ability in order to turn it into a big play, right? He's 4th right now in yards after the catch among receivers this year. So I think big days are going to come for Flowers. he just needs to find the end zone once in a while. And that one is kind of like, I'm hoping that it happens. I don't know that I have anything like super predictive, but when you're getting the kind of volume that he's getting, touchdowns tend to come eventually. Ricky Pearsall, so he's missed 6 games. He suffered that PCL sprain. Back at practice this week, though. Not 100% sure that he's going to suit up for this one. He might. If not, at least he's getting very close here. And you look at him, like, don't forget what he did in the first month of the season. Like, everybody out there, he is a name that I've seen even dropped in some leagues. I picked him up in one league. I think you got to go out and get him. If other people have him and they're not excited about him coming back here, they're worried about now a bunch of people are getting healthy for the 49ers. There's a lot of pass catchers there. Juwan Jennings is available. George Kittle's back. I don't think you need to worry about that. And I know that some of Pearsall's stats came when those guys were hurt early in the season, but 4 for 108, 4 for 56, 8 for 117. Those were the opening 3 weeks. You go back to last year. How did he finish the season? 8 for 141 and a touchdown, 6 for 69 in a touchdown. I think that's more than enough signal when you're talking about a former first round pick here, a guy who was definitely flashed. I think he's somebody that you can get for wide receiver 3 flex kind of value, but who has wide receiver 2 potential in this offense, especially if we get Brock Purdy back at a level that we hope that he's 100% healthy and producing like he can, because I think that'll just make this offense that much better as well. And then the Jefferson one, and like I said, it's Jefferson. It's also kind of Addison. I talked about this on Monday, but there's just no way when you look at this schedule to me that they get the Bears this week, which is a very good matchup, the Commanders in week 14, the Cowboys in week 15, the Giants in week 16, the Lions in week 17. No one has an easier fantasy schedule when it comes to receivers than the Vikings receivers do. And I just have a hard time believing that a guy like Justin Jefferson isn't going to come through. And even a guy like Jordan Addison, who had 11 targets last week, and I know it didn't turn into a ton of production, but he is a very talented player. These guys are going to have some big performances in those easier matchups. So Jefferson, you would be hoping for top 10 kind of results, obviously. Addison's a guy that's more of like that high-end wide receiver 3, but with some big-time upside if he can connect on some of those catches. He's got that big playability as well. I think he could be a wide receiver 2 in some of those matchups. So I think those are 4 guys that I am going out and trying to get in most leagues. Let me know what you think, though, Harmon.
God, I hope you're right about the Justin Jefferson thing, man. I don't even actually have any Justin Jefferson teams this year because I had CeeDee Lamb ranked higher, and I ended up with him more often than not, or went somewhere else. I actually don't think I have any Justin Jefferson teams, so I am not like personally invested in this, but it really could be just a matchup based thing here going forward. The thing is, though, McCarthy has played at a level where I don't even know if him going against a team that's bad on defense really moves the needle all that much for me. Like, he just, as an individual, has to play better. But we're still 4 starts into this guy's career. There's every chance in the world that he just, I'm not going to say turns it on to the level where he's the next Patrick Mahomes. Not that anybody's ever implied that, but he can at least be a damn functional starting quarterback in the league. Like, can we get this guy to functional starting quarterback in the league and then progress throughout the course of the year? I think that's possible. I'm a little more skeptical of it than you are, but I am definitely hoping you are right. Your other 3 names, though, I really, really like. Quickly on Zay Flowers, he was again in the article that I mentioned today. So this stat I thought was funny. Weeks 1 to 5, Zay Flowers had a 28.8% share of the Ravens' targets and 32.2% share of the air yards. Weeks 6 to 10, 28.6% of the targets, 33.1% of the air yards. So, like, truly nothing has changed about his role or anything like that. As you mentioned, he just hasn't hit touchdowns and hasn't hit big plays like we saw him do in the first 2 weeks of the season, which one of those was a matchup with the Browns. So there is at least that. The league that you picked Pearsall up in, was that our office league that we're both in together?
I don't know who dropped him, so I didn't want to say it, but
it
yes,
was me.
It is the Yahoo.
It was
office
me.
league.
No, it was me. It was me, and let me explain myself here really quickly, because
I did not know that. I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting some random in that league that I didn't know who actually dropped.
No.
Hilarious.
It was me, and listen, it had to be done because this team has just been it's easily my most annoying fantasy team. Okay. It's been a lot of injuries. Amarian Hampton is hurt. Joe Burrow, which I never draft Joe Burrow, but I drafted him just because he was highest on my board. He got hurt. I'm mysteriously CeeDee Lamb was my first round pick, hurt. It's just one of those teams where I'm just constantly covering holes. My IR spots are obviously filled. And this is the week where I have Joe Flacco, Chase Brown. Chase Brown was an early pick on mine too. That did not start the season well. So I've been trying to claw my way back in this league. And because I have both Cowboys receivers, Chase Brown and Joe Flacco, I had a bunch of dudes on bye last week, and I had to fill a starting spot. And I had to look at Pearsall and say, look, you're my guy. I got you in other leagues, but you got to go. And the dude that I picked up was actually Juwan Jennings because he was available on waivers for whatever reason.
Hilarious.
Picked him up, started him last week, got a touchdown out of it because we had to survive in advance. So that's just a lesson for all you people out there. And I'm bad at this, so I'm giving you advice that I'm bad at. Sometimes you got to be cold-hearted. You got to take the emotions out of it, and you just got to do what needs to be done. So we'll see if I can climb. I'm 4-6. I'm trying to climb back into this thing and make the damn playoffs. We'll see if I can do it.
You've won 3 in a row. I'm looking at it right now. You've won 3 games in a row, right? Yeah, well done.
I have, dude. I have had.
You were right on the edge of the playoffs.
I have had to scratch. I have had to scratch and freaking claw in this league. It's easily, again, the most annoying one. Again, it's an intercompany league. It's like with our bosses. I'm really not trying to embarrass myself in front of the people who signed the paychecks. So I'm trying to make it happen in this league. We'll see if we can get it done. So that is why I dropped Ricky Pearsall. It was funny. As you mentioned, you picked him. I was like, I bet Boone picked him up when I dropped him. I just knew that was going to happen to me. I thought maybe I could sneak him back on. No chance. Of course, I dropped
a little too much fab even to get him on my team. I think my bid was way bigger than anyone else's bid because I was like, oh man, Ricky Pearsall's available? Absolutely. And now maybe we're going in opposite directions because I started hot in that league. I'm still doing all right. But I got some injuries that I'm dealing with now. BTJ's hurt. I got some other guys. Trey Benson's been hurt for a while. So now I'm trying to keep it going here. Hopefully you don't pass me at some point now that your team's getting healthy and getting hot.
No, we'll see what happens. I thought I was holding Joe Burrow in a ceremonial IR spot, but it sounds like he could actually be back, which is nice to see. Last guy here that you mentioned, Jameson Williams. And yeah, look, I'm Ricky Pearsall is going to be awesome. I got Ricky Pearsall in other leagues, and I'm with you. I'm definitely buying him, and he's somebody I'm obviously really excited to see back. But Jameson Williams, you mentioned the change to Dan Campbell as the play caller. I just think that is a materially different situation now for him. When we talked in the offseason, Boone, about the Lions offense and then maybe taking a step back without Ben Johnson, we agreed that one of the players who was probably most sensitive to that change was Jameson Williams, because I think he is a good receiver, but he's kind of a unique receiver in terms of how you want to deploy him. I think it is so tempting to look at his speed and say, oh yeah, that guy's our deep threat. We got to let him run deep, all that stuff. I also didn't even like the comments that John Morton threw out and Jameson Williams threw out in the offseason about, oh yeah, I'm a little more free in this system. I'm like, I don't know if I want a lot of freedom for Jameson Williams. I want him running crossers and in breakers, what he was doing with Ben Johnson, which it took Ben Johnson a minute to figure out that should be the usage for Jameson Williams. And I think we were proven completely correct about that because he was so quiet to start the year under Morton, but then I think the usage just immediately changed with Dan Campbell, getting him on these crossers, 9.8 yards after catch per reception last week. And you mentioned some of those matchups. I think Jameson Williams could go from one of those guys, Boone, who crushed you in the first half of the year to end up being somebody who actually finishes really strong here.
Yeah, and maybe we could get Dan Campbell to walk across the field and take over play calling for the Eagles this week. That would be nice. Could we have like a full-time play caller on offense where he just goes back and forth and actually gets some nice looks for A.J. Brown too? That would be a nice way for all this to work out.
Dan Campbell's the man. He's when people are like, oh, Nick Sirianni, he's a culture guy. Dan Campbell's a culture guy who also is basically Sean McVay calling plays over there. So that's a pretty cool head coach to have if you are a Detroit Lions fan. All right, we're going to take our first quick break. We come back. We're going to talk about a rookie running back potentially getting some big opportunity this week. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back. We're continuing to preview Week 11 here of the NFL season. Boone, let's get into your fourth question of the week.
Is it finally here? Is RJ Harvey season finally here, Harmon? We've talked about this guy all year long, going back to the summer as one of these rookies from the great rookie class, a guy who could potentially break out. And we knew that J.K. Dobbins would be involved early and maybe even be the lead back early. I don't know that I thought it was going to take this long, but as J.K. Dobbins was playing well, they started to work Harvey in a little bit. And it seemed like it was going to continue down that path, but we always knew in the back of our minds, and it's very unfortunate, that J.K. Dobbins has never played a full NFL season. Injuries have always showed up at some point and been a problem for him. And unfortunately, he got hurt last week. He suffered a foot injury, and there's like some weirdness around it too, right? Because he seemed very upset about it. He called out the officials for not calling, the hip drop tackle on the play. And he was like weirdly mad about it to the point where you started to question, like, hey, that level of anger, like, is this guy really hurt? Like, is this guy going to miss the rest of the season or something? Then we get word from Tom Pelissero that Dobbins was going for a second opinion, which is rarely a good thing, right? That's not normally a good sign. Normally that means you didn't like the first opinion and you're getting the second one in hopes they're going to say something different. Beat writer Chris Thomason, he reported that they're considering IR for Dobbins. Not sure if that's the case yet or not, because we haven't heard more about that. But just terrible news for a guy that was having another good season. And now it looks like, again, it's going to get derailed by injury. And that was after he had some good seasons with the Ravens. That was after he was having a really good season with the Chargers last year. And around this time of the year, he got hurt and wasn't really the same after that. So you got to feel for him. We wish him the best. We want to see a quick recovery. We want to see him back on the field this year and helping this team and helping fantasy managers as well down the stretch. However, for fantasy, we got to talk about what this means, right? And what it means is the door is now open for RJ Harvey, and he has flashed that playmaking ability on multiple occasions this year. Like I said, they started to get him more involved, but we've kind of seen it all year long. Despite only seeing double-digit targets in one game this season, he's topped 50 scrimmage yards on 4 different occasions. He's also become a regular in the end zone, right? 5 touchdowns over the last 4 weeks. And he was playing that like clear change of pace role in those games. And there was like a game, I think it was against the Bengals, where they ran the ball a ton and he got more work in that game. But still, he wasn't the lead back, and yet he was still finding ways to contribute, was still finding ways to produce, and was turning into like a fantasy flex option, was kind of in like the RB3 flex range in my rankings most weeks. Now this week going up against the Chiefs, not the best matchup here. If he gets the start, which it seems like he's going to, they're the 7th hardest opponent for fantasy running backs. But we did see James Cook had a pretty good game against them last week, 125 scrimmage yards. So it's not like it's impossible to run against the Chiefs. And Harvey has the ability to break a long run or two, which could totally change your day. I mean, we've seen that from Travion Henderson, right? Like the big breakout game for Henderson, the 150-yard 2-touchdown game. You throw a couple long runs in there, and all of a sudden that yardage total looks huge, right? Even though efficiency-wise and some of the other runs, not quite as good. The thing we don't know is, will Sean Payton continue to do what he often does, which is get a bunch of running backs involved, right? Are we going to see Tyler Bidet? Are we going to see Jaleel McLaughlin? Are these guys going to continue to be involved to continue to make this really a 3-man committee, which at times it's been this year with Bidet being the 3rd running back? Will they continue to do that? And over the last, season and a half, we've seen both of those guys at different times get probably more touches than we would like to in this backfield and take away from other guys that we would rather see getting the work. So that's going to be something to factor in. But from my view, from my projections, Harvey, in my mind, is going to be the lead dog. And in that role, I think he is a fantasy running back too. I think he's a guy that has RB1 potential in this offense with the kind of talent and ability that he has. And this is why we've been holding him all year, right? This is why I've even mentioned him as a buy multiple times, because I just, as bad as it is, really felt like at some point J.K. Dobbins was going to get injured, and it sucks, but that did come to fruition. And it's terrible that that's the way Harvey's going to get this opportunity, but that's what's happening now. And I think for fantasy, you're going to be very happy that you have him on your team, because I think he can really produce here, Harmon.
Yeah, this is how it happens for a lot of these rookies, is injury creates opportunities, unfortunately. I mean, look at a guy like I'm going to curse him because he's playing tonight, but look at a guy like Kyle Williams just completely doing nothing all season long. Kayshon Boutte misses a game. He goes out there and he makes a big play. Travion Henderson in the same team. Ramondre Stevenson, now he's making plays for this Patriots team, doing what many people thought he could do in the summer. And that's kind of how it goes. I mean, DeMeco Ryans, Texans head coach, had a really good comment about this today where he was basically just saying, hey, like rookies are done. Nobody's a rookie anymore. Like now you've been in the league, like we're counting on you. And I hope he's telling the truth about that, because there's a couple rookies on that team I sure as hell would like to see a lot more of. But yeah, that's kind of how it happens. We want it to be so automatic. I almost think, Boone, we hammered drafting rookies so hard in the offseason that maybe next offseason we need to come with like a disclaimer, like it's an ad read. If you're going to draft rookies, please be aware it might not happen in weeks 1 through 5 through 6 through 7 through 8. It might take a little bit. We might need to just do a disclaimer about that every time we discuss rookies, because again, that's usually how these seasons go for these younger players. So this could just be RJ Harvey's time. Now, in terms of the split, we have no idea. Like, we have no idea if Jaleel McLaughlin will be involved. I do think we know that Tyler Bidet will be involved in some way, because he has been involved, as you mentioned. Now, it's not as a fantasy relevant player because he is almost exclusively just a passing down, pass protector, long down and distance back, which I do think matters for this Broncos team because Bo Nix is such a disaster under pressure. You want to keep him as clean as possible. I'm not sure that Tyler Bidet's magical pass protection skills have been helping Bo Nix stay out of chaos too much often lately, but nevertheless, probably important. At the same time, Boone, to bring it back to the Bo Nix thing, I just look at this Broncos team right now and how just flat out bad they are on offense right now. Don't you get the feeling that they need something else? They need another dimension here. And it's not, they can't just do what they did last year, which is just throw deep overs and dig routes to Cortland Sutton as the X receiver. We've seen teams clearly take that away. Part of finding something else here could be a guy like RJ Harvey in the screen game, a guy like RJ Harvey as a big play, option, and just bringing more pop to the run game. I think that's possible. He hasn't been perfect this year in isolation, but nevertheless, I think this is the time to try something new here for this offense.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it seems like they kind of whiffed on the tight end pickup, right? Getting Evan Ingram, who they kind of talked about before the season, but he really hasn't given them much. You wonder if another rookie like Pat Bryant, who we've talked about before, who I really like, could he potentially come on a little bit as the season goes on here? We've seen him get more opportunity, some of it because Marvin Mims was out, and I think Marvin Mims will be back this week. But still, he's another wrinkle in that offense potentially. I will say, though, on like the RJ Harvey, like league winner, if Dobbins does miss a lot of time, and again, we don't know how much time Dobbins is going to miss. He's not on IR yet. We don't know how long. It seems like he's going to miss this week. After that, they go on bye in week 12. And that's probably why we're not getting a lot of updates about it right now, because they'll probably reassess here and they'll see what the second opinion is and all that sort of stuff. But a bye in week 12 still coming. And then when you look at the fantasy playoffs for this Broncos team, the Packers, the Jags, and the Chiefs, those are not great matchups for fantasy backs in terms of fantasy points allowed to that position. So yes, Harvey could still come through in those games if he was the starter. Yes, Dobbins could come through in those games if he was the starter. And yet, those are some pretty tough matchups, especially the Packers and the Chiefs, where you wonder if you're going to see ceiling games and the kind of games that could propel you to the next round of the fantasy playoffs. So I don't know that we're going to get that league winner from this backfield. And yet Harvey's still getting this opportunity to show us what he could do as the lead back. It's more than welcome at this point, and I think he has all the talent in the world to be able to do something pretty good with it. And like I said, turn it into top 20, top 24 results with some potential upside on top of that.
I like it. All right, let's get to your fifth question for the week.
Oh, this is the one. I really debated even bringing this up. Producer Colin told me I was doing a self-own by having this in here, but do the Bills have the worst pass-catching core in the league? And I'm not counting injuries on this. So if you're talking about like the Giants, I'm still looking at them as they have Malik Neighbors. The Jets, Garrett Wilson is on their team. So we're still counting all those guys.
Okay.
I'm not talking about right now in week 11. I'm talking just overall. If you look at all the pass catching cores across the league, who has the worst one? And I don't know if the Bills are the worst, but the fact that they are like in the running, it's really, really sad, right? And you're here to tell me, like, is this just me being like a bit of a bitter Bills fan because they didn't make a move at the deadline and they really needed to? And then you go, okay, well, they didn't make the move at the deadline, but they have a plan. And then they come out and just get smacked around by the Dolphins. And the thing is, if you don't make that move to get that another piece, then you're going with the guys you have. And if a couple injuries strike, then what does it look like? And that's exactly what's happened now, right? We have Dalton Kincaid, who's week to week with a hamstring issue. We have Khalil Shakir in a non-contact jersey. He's dealing with a rib and ankle injuries. So it seems like I still think he's going to play this week, but we got to monitor that one. And then you look at some of the obvious candidates out there who might have the worst pass catching cores. Like the Raiders are the first one that pops to mind because their receivers, not great. They trade away Jacoby Myers, but they have Brock Bowers, and Brock Bowers is essentially like an elite wide receiver. So I think overall that, to me, bumps them above the Bills. The Titans aren't great. Calvin Ridley, though, we know that he's like a veteran who can produce a little bit. They got some young players, Shamir DK, Elikeo Manor, like some guys that have flashed. That's a pretty tough sell. They're probably the worst one. But the Browns are out there like Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman. I would argue like Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman is kind of similar to Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman. Like it's not that different in my mind. And then you look at Cleveland and the tight end duo that they have in Harold Fannin Jr. and David Njoku, and you go, man, that's just kind of equal to the Bills potentially. Like I don't think the Bills are blowing them out of the water. So not making a move at the deadline, I think, is detrimental to the Super Bowl hopes, but it also like robs us from a fantasy perspective. We would love to see them have that number one target for Josh Allen, that guy that they can pair with him for a long time. And they haven't had anything close to that since they got rid of Stephon Diggs. And I understand all the reasons that they moved on from Diggs, and I think it did make sense for them. But the fact that they haven't been able to go out and get someone to really help this pass catching core is really an embarrassment for the franchise. And I think it's just disheartening from a real life and from a fantasy perspective, especially now that we have these injuries and we don't know when Dalton Kincaid is going to be back. And even Shakir is just somebody that you look at as like a wide receiver 3 with a fairly limited ceiling when it comes to fantasy. It's a bad scenario all around when we know that Jacoby Myers and we know that Rashid Shaheed were out there for the taking. But tell me, Harmon, is this just me like venting and getting this off my chest because I'm a Bills fan?
Oh no, dude, it's pretty bad. So I'm not gonna tell you it's pretty bad. it's not good. And I want to come back to the tweet that we're showing right now. I want to come back to that in a second. But first, I think the Browns, when they didn't have Cedric Tillman, now that Tillman's back, I think that's much better. Just in terms of wide receiver room, that was pretty ghastly. The Titans, that's rough. I mean, Ridley, he's just had a weird year, but he's still a pretty good player. The rookies, I don't know. I like Io Manor and DK is a nice player, but Io Manor didn't do anything for me really. And the Raiders, I hate how they've managed that wide receiver room, but having Brock Bowers helps. And if we're not counting. It's interesting because I ask myself this question sometimes. Like, would you rather have a room like the Jets have where it's one high-end superstar number one receiver and then nothing behind him, or what the Bills maybe tried to do, which is a collection of guys with different skill sets? That's the thing here, is that they tried to have this collection of guys with different skill sets and it's just not working. And we're showing the tweet right now from Kevin Massare. I don't know. Bills will have 3 new wide receivers active. Excited to see what Josh Palmer, Gabe Davis, and Mecole Hardman can do over the options they've had. I wouldn't put the word excited with this version of Gabe Davis and Mecole Hardman. You could maybe have gotten me. I never was high on either of those players, but you could have maybe gotten me interested 4 years ago. I don't know about right now. So that's where this team is. Like, could Keon Coleman be inactive this week? I think that's live. Like, Gabe and Palmer are outside receivers. I think Samuel, it's just unfortunate. He's just not the same player that he was when he was a little bit younger. He's had too many injuries. Elijah Moore, I think, is a guy they might want to take a look at to get more out of, but no, it's rough, dude. It's not a good situation here. And I just think this has been a pretty bad personnel management of this wide receiver room. It just, I was like never really high on Coleman, and I don't think they've done him any favors with how they've deployed him. So yeah, it's pretty bad, and it does leave even Shakir, and I like Shakir a lot. 46% of his catches have happened at or behind the line of scrimmage. So he's a guy who fits a particular role with the team. It's not really as a true downfield guy.
And they play the Bucs this week, and you think back to the draft when like people gave the Bucs a hard time for spending a first round pick on Emeka Egbuka, and it was because they already had such a plethora of riches at that position, and yet look how that's worked out, right? You have Chris Godwin hurt, you have Mike Evans hurt, and they are lucky that they have Emeka Egbuka. And now they're going to get Godwin and Evans back at some point down the stretch here. And if they're a legit contender, now you look at that receiver room for January and you go, man, it's going to be pretty good. Where, yeah, the Bills, like, what do they have? They have, the guys in that tweet, like Mecole Hardman being like the savior who's going to finally bring like that speed element to your offense. Like, how sad is that? Like, and again, I always want to relate this back to fantasy, right? It's not just me having gripes as a Bills fan. And for fantasy, it's just really, really bad. And every week when we talk about the Bills, you say, yeah, you're going to play Josh Allen, you're going to play James Cook, and you're probably going to play Khalil Shakir. It's like a wide receiver 3 flex. And if Dalton Kincaid's out there, you're going to hope that, he's having a good season. You're going to hope he finds the end zone and has a decent game. And other than that, you're not looking at anybody in this offense. And that's a shame when you have an offense that's led by Josh Allen, that we don't have more pieces that we can get excited about.
Yeah. Josh Palmer is a jag, but I'm at least interested to see what he can do, if he can help this team out a little bit. But
yeah, I mean, he wasn't doing much earlier in the season, but he was hurt. He was hurt at one point and playing through it, so maybe that impacted him. But yeah,
Gabe Davis is exactly this tweet. Gabe Davis is what the team needs right now. They clearly all these people, these Bills tweets were showing up here. Those folks did not watch Gabe Davis once he left, and Gabe wasn't even that good with the Bills in my opinion, but they did not watch him when he went to Jacksonville. That was not a good product. He could barely move, and he's coming off a serious injury, so I don't know about that. And yeah, to your point about the Bucs, how about the fact that they took Tez Johnson in the 7th round? Thank God they did. Tez has been really, really good for them. And that was like, they need another receiver. Yeah, they need another receiver. Remember Jalen McMillan? Do you remember that guy? He's in a freaking neck brace. He hasn't played all year. We don't know if he's even going to play this year. So injuries, like, things happen. That's all they ever do. And like that, having Tez Johnson on this team has been huge. So continuing to hammer that position is always a good idea. So no, I don't think this is just you being a sad Bills fan. I think this is a referendum on what can happen with an offense that has a great quarterback, but we don't have trusty targets. Like, yeah, this is not a ecosystem that I think anybody should be looking to invest in from a fantasy standpoint. But let's. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say we've talked about Patrick Mahomes in the last couple of years that were kind of down years from a fantasy perspective. And all of a sudden now, boom, he's right back up near the top. Well, what did they do? They found him receivers, right? They found him Rashee Rice, and they found Xavier Worthy and some of these guys that are contributing to the offense that they didn't have necessarily, or that were injured in those couple of years when his numbers really declined. It's a testament to Josh Allen, and obviously, he runs the ball a ton, and that keeps his fantasy stock high. But yeah, the fact that they're just trying to kind of go about it the way the Chiefs went about it at a time when the Chiefs offense wasn't operating at, peak efficiency. And now the Chiefs have gotten through that. Let's hope the Bills at some point can find a receiver like Rashee Rice to pair with Josh Allen.
That'd be nice. Find some, SMU receiver and take him from being a sacrificial X receiver to a big slot. That would be nice. Let's see if they can do that. Okay, let's get to your last question of the week here.
There's just a bunch of other guys that we didn't necessarily talk about during the waiver wire show who are kind of deeper pieces, but guys who I think could potentially get into fantasy lineups this week and be starters and be potentially decent starters as well. So who are some of the under the radar fantasy starters for week 11? And the first guy on my list here is a guy who's going to be playing against the Bills this week. That's Sean Tucker at running back. Amari DeMercado, who we've seen do some things the last couple of weeks. He gets to play the 49ers. That Cardinals backfield still waiting on Trey Benson. He hasn't come back yet. Sticking with the Cardinals, Michael Wilson getting an opportunity to potentially be their number one receiver with Marvin Harrison Jr. having an appendectomy this week. Trey Tucker, who had a quiet game last week, even though they traded away Jacoby Myers. And yet this week, what a matchup against the Cowboys. So you look to him as a potential option. And then Pat Freiermuth going against the Bengals again, and that was the game where he popped up for his best contest of the year, his best stat line. Can he do it again against that defense that just hemorrhages fantasy points to everybody? I think he potentially can. He's in the streamer mix here. And for Tucker to start off at the top, Bucky Irving back at practice this week. So we're going to have to watch to see what is going on with Bucky, but he's just practicing in a limited fashion. I don't think that means he's going to come back this week. He's missed a bunch of time. I don't think they're going to rush him back. So great to see him back at practice, but seems to me like we might not see him play this week. This might be just getting him ready to come back in the coming weeks. And in his absence, Rachaad White has been the lead back, of course, continues to be the lead back, but he's seen his numbers dip in recent weeks, and we've seen the team give Sean Tucker some extra work. In their last two games, they were sandwiched around that week 9 bye. Tucker turned 12 carries into 42 yards and a touchdown against the Saints, and then 10 touches into 51 yards against the Patriots. The Patriots are a tough matchup on the ground, so the fact that he was able to have some success against them, that's nice to see. Those are flex-worthy stats, right? And now he gets his easiest matchup yet against the Bills, who are giving up the 6th most fantasy points to running back. So he might just be a 1-week play. If Bucky Irving comes back next week, then Sean Tucker probably goes to the waiver wire at that point. If Bucky returns this week, then forget about everything I'm saying right now, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think Tucker's going to be a sneaky flex option for you in this one against a pretty nice matchup in the Bills. Amari DeMercado, so we all know, he had that one game where he had the big play and he fumbled on the goal line and everybody just dunked on him. But if you look in the last couple of weeks, he started to put up some decent numbers, right? 78 yards on 15 touches in week 9, 104 yards on 7 touches last week. He can make some explosive plays. Again, we don't know an update on Trey Benson other than they just keep saying he's taking it day by day. They haven't opened up his practice window yet, so he's not coming back this week. I don't know when he's going to return. So DeMercado is somebody that could have some legs here, not only as a potential RB3 with some upside this week, especially if he can add a touchdown to this kind of stat line, but a guy that might have another week or two in him if Trey Benson continues to remain out. And we just haven't got an update to make me think that Trey Benson is coming back anytime soon here. So keep that one in mind. Michael Wilson, very, very interesting, right? And you look at everything that's happened that's just kind of set him up. You look at Jacoby Brissett getting under center, and all of a sudden his numbers have started to pop up a little bit. And then just a ton of injuries. The Harrison Jr. one that I mentioned, also Zay Jones going on season-ending IR, Simi Fehoko going on IR. It's really opened this up to be the receiver room for Michael Wilson. And, he hadn't topped 20 yards in a single outing through the first 5 games. And then Brissett gets under center. And it hasn't been huge numbers, but 4 for 44, 3 for 40, 3 for 61, 4 for 34. And that was while playing a complementary role behind McBride, who, again, he's another one of those tight ends where he is the de facto number 1 receiver in the offense, but then also Harrison was out there. So we're taking Harrison away. I think we're going to see Wilson get some more opportunity here. It's rare when you can go out and get, even though he's not technically the number 1 receiver because McBride's there, it's rare to go out and get a number 1 receiver off the waiver wire. So you grab him. I think he's a wide receiver 3 flex option this week. And again, this is another one that could bump past a week because we don't know how long it's going to take Harrison to come back. It might be a couple weeks for him to recover. Trey Tucker, it's all about the matchup, right? He's going against the Cowboys. This game has a very lofty total, 49.5 projected points. Cowboys are favored by 3.5, but the Raiders still have the 12th highest implied total on the week here. So someone is scoring points in this offense. Yes, it'll probably be Brock Bowers. Yes, it'll probably be Ashton Genty. I think Trey Tucker could have one of those games like he had earlier in the season where he was usable for fantasy. So he's a wide receiver 3 with some upside. And then Pat Freiermuth, this one is kind of more of that dart throw streamer option, but you look back in that first game against the Bengals, 5 receptions, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. Everybody remembers because it was on a Thursday night. We all got to see it happen in prime time. Hasn't had a ton of big games, but he found the end zone in another game recently as well. And you're going to have DJ Turner, their excellent corner. He goes up against number 1 receivers. So I think he's going to match against DK Metcalf. And that's what forces them now to throw to the tight ends, to throw to the backs. And I think that's really going to make Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith potentially playable this week as streaming options.
I'll tell you what, buddy, I'm throwing that dart. I've got at least one team. I think actually it's that office team that we keep talking about here that I've
Just
got
keeps
Juwan
coming back
Johnson.
to the office league.
Keeps coming back. I think I picked up Freiermuth to stream because I don't have Juwan Johnson this week. So, yeah, listen, the teams that have fried the Bengals the most, they get their tight ends involved. It's how it goes. So, yeah, I think obviously the Steelers are a great example, but we saw what Colson Loveland did to this Bengals defense recently. So, yeah, I definitely think that Freiermuth, it's going to be tough because he just isn't on the field consistently, but he is definitely worth a dart throw in this matchup. And Michael Wilson, I'm really intrigued by what Michael Wilson's going to do in this game because I don't think he's bad, man. I think he actually is. I'm not saying he's some sleeping superstar or anything, but he's a useful player. I think that fits in the archetype of receiver that should work in this offense, works over the middle of the field, kind of like a poor man's Michael Pittman type of player has been my comp for him since I charted him for reception perception as a rookie. And in this offense with Jacoby Brissett, I think you can get to those throws better. And this team in San Francisco, the opponent this week, just does not have a pass rush. And Jacoby Brissett, when he's blitzed, is good. Like he's actually been really good against the blitz. So I expect him to get the ball out this week, and McBride's going to get his. He's going to get peppered like crazy. But if you're desperate, Michael Wilson's a quality fantasy starter, I think.
Well, and we have a little bit of breaking news here, Harmon. It looks like they've announced Brock Purdy will return to the starting lineup on Sunday against the Cardinals in that game. Shanahan just said that. So we're going to get Brock Purdy back this week, like I said, which I think could help the offense as long as he's 100% healthy and we don't have another scenario where he's pushing to come back and he ends up aggravating the injury and then misses more time. If we get Brock Purdy at 100%, he is still a better quarterback than Mac Jones. For as good as Mac Jones has played in relief, Brock Purdy is the man in this offense. Brock Purdy, fantasy-wise, a guy who's been a top 12 fantasy quarterback on a per-game basis each of the last 2 years. And now he's coming back to an offense that has George Kittle again, that has potentially Ricky Pearsall coming back this week or coming back soon. And I think I've talked about this before, but I think people forget how good this 49ers attack can be when these guys are all healthy. And this is a matchup where the Cardinals defense, they've played pretty well this season, but I think this is a matchup where they could totally crush, especially with Purdy back. So this is really exciting from the standpoint of the 49ers being a potential contender, but also from a fantasy perspective and trying to get the most out of this offense.
Yeah, look, Mac Jones has been good with this offense, and I think he's potentially earned himself an opportunity if the Niners can cash him in as a trade candidate because he did sign a 2-year deal. But Purdy does bring a little bit more from the anticipation throws deep and over the middle of the field. And obviously, as a scrambler, as an improviser, he is significant. Now, we'll see. Coming off that toe injury, he only got one aggressive practice in, whatever an aggressive practice means, but that's what he got in this week, according to Kyle Shanahan. And I think we'll see what he's like as a mover off that injury, but he brings a lot more pop to this offense. How about that? We're talking about a Cardinals receiver. That news breaks right as we're talking about this game. Sometimes things just work out for the old Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. So I'm really excited to see Pearsall and Purdy back together if we do indeed get Ricky Pearsall, because, yeah, I just think Purdy brings a little bit more upside to this offense and could be an interesting fantasy matchup with two bad defenses and two offenses that are certainly able to put some production up. So, yeah, if you're desperate, Michael Wilson on the waiver wire, potentially a pretty nice option for you. All right, we're going to take our next quick break. When we come back, it's time for literally no one's games of the week. We'll get into those dust balls right after this. All right, welcome back. It is time to get into literally no one's games of the week. Sorry, the yawning cracks me up every time. It's just like, it just does not. It's the complete inverse of the first segment where that little pop top, like, all right, let's talk some ball. The yawning just makes you want to take a snooze. All right, speaking of taking a snooze, maybe you want to sleep in early Sunday morning because we got a little bit of a questionable game overseas. I have nicknames for all three of these games this week just to spice it up a little bit here. Commanders versus Dolphins, the International Sadness Convention. These are two teams that are just not going in a good direction right now, especially Washington, which certainly imagined better for itself than this. My big thing in this game, I mean, it's just the Commanders, yikes. The Dolphins, though, are in a great spot here, though. Their offense, I think, is rolling after what they did to your Bills last week. Devon Achane cooking, Jalen Waddle, over 80 yards in all but one game since Tyreek Hill has gone down. He is top 5 in both yards and first downs per route run. He's been incredible. He is just in a position to absolutely smash this week. So at least from that perspective, from a fantasy angle, you can get up in the morning and get excited to watch some Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane.
And like, is that it? Like, is that all we're really excited about for this game? Like, you could use Marcus Mariota could be a streaming option at quarterback. I don't know that I feel good about anyone else on the Dolphins. So you look at the Commanders now, and it's like Deebo Samuel not putting up huge yardage totals. So you're kind of hoping that he finds the end zone. That's about the only way that you think he's going to come through for you. And then the Commanders backfield, like Chris Rodriguez Jr., we thought he got hurt last week, that maybe he could be moved out of the way, and then you could have Bill Krosky-Merritt out there getting an opportunity against this Dolphins defense. But now Rodriguez is practicing in full. He's going to play. So we're going to have some weird committee in that backfield, and it's going to be very difficult to figure out exactly who's going to step up there. This is a very tough game to try to find usable fantasy pieces. I will commend you, though, because I can see all the nicknames you have for all of these games, and they are all quite good. The International Sadness Convention needs to be on like a t-shirt or something like that, though. That's a good one.
Well, I might be selling more than some Commanders jerseys right now. Yeah, Deebo Samuel, when I put together the splits article for wide receivers, he had the largest negative gap in terms of what he did in the first 5 weeks versus what he's done since. Wide receiver 8 in points per game from weeks 1 to 5. Week 6 to 10, wide receiver 65 in points per game. He's been dealing with injuries. He's slowing down a little bit. That's the Deebo Samuel story. Like there's only so much you can do for a player that I think has diminished at this point. So he is definitely somebody hopefully you sold high on earlier this year, because I definitely do not have a lot of optimism for him. I mean, you could play him, but it's getting pretty dicey at this point. I want to talk about that backfield just here really quickly. Do you think what's your instinct on this? Do you think that Chris Rodriguez actually did anything in practice to be like, you know what, we got to get a longer look at this guy? Or was this more of just we got to throw anything else out there because this is not working? Because I do think, look, the Bill overexcitement in fantasy has aged quite poorly, but I thought he was okay as an individual player. And I'm not sure Chris Rodriguez really brings him anything else, but I'm not sure he's worse than Bill either, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Chris Rodriguez might be the kind of player that's like just doing what the coaches ask, just getting what's blocked. It isn't like super exciting, but is playing well enough, and they just want like some sort of stability, if we want to call it that, in the backfield. The thing I wonder is, at what point do the Commanders start to look to the future? And what point do they go, okay, we got to get some of these young guys looks, whether it's in the backfield with JCM, whether it's Jalen Lane, like let's get some of these other guys out there and see what they can do and whether they can be pieces of this offense in the future, because they might think they still have a chance this season. I'm here to tell them it's over for the Commanders. Like, I don't think they're going anywhere this year, even if Daniels can come back in a few weeks or something like that. I don't think it's going to happen for them this season. So start to do some self-scouting. Let's see what you have at JCM. Let's see what Lane can do at receiver. I mean, we joked about it on Monday, but like Treylon Burks led them in receiving last week. Like, that's how bad it is there, right? So perhaps I should have mentioned that.
And then he suffered a finger injury, and then is now out for multiple games. I mean, that's how down bad the Commanders are right now.
Yeah, like and maybe we'll get Terry McLaurin back soon, right? Like it's possible that he could come back soon. I know he's at practice, I think practicing off to the side, but he's kind of like a forgotten guy, and it's a bit of a lost season for him. So yeah, I think you've nailed it. This is definitely a game that qualifies for this section because you and I will be awake watching it, but I don't necessarily think a lot of people are going to wake up for that one.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're an East Coast person, be out of bed by 9:30 a.m. Don't be pathetic. But if you're on the West Coast, you can sleep in on this one. All right, next game up here, Panthers at Falcons, the NFC South Panic Invitational. Because, Boone, whichever one of these teams loses this week, their fans are going to be freaking out. I've seen a lot of existential angst from both of these fan bases on social media this week, and most of it kind of revolves around just not hitting expectations with the quarterbacks that they have here. Nate Tice and I did a whole breakdown on like the blame pie for both of these teams. I think our conclusion was Penix has not been perfect, but I think is a guy you can play with. Bryce Young, we're not so sure if that can continue. So when you look at these two teams, if you have to look at them, if you look them in the eye, Boone, stare down these NFC South weirdo squads, anything stand out to you from a fantasy angle with either one of them?
I mean, we covered the Panthers on Monday. We talked about Tedero McMillan, and I believe we put him in the coping corner, if I remember correctly.
We did.
He is certainly a guy that I think has a tough matchup here. The Falcons defense, pretty good against receivers. And we've just seen that other than that Cowboys game when he went off kind of as predicted with the 2 touchdowns, he just hasn't had big fantasy performances. He's had some decent yardage totals at times, but if you're not finding the end zone, it's not really winning anybody their fantasy week, right? You get maybe close to double-digit fantasy points, and that's about it. So I look at this as another week where I'm not that excited to have him in my lineup. He's a pretty risky, low-ceiling wide receiver 3 type option. Rico Dowdle just keeps chugging along, and I know he's getting a little bit banged up. And I thought it was really interesting that when reporters asked Dave Canales, like, Rico Dowdle picking up these injuries, missing some practice, limited in practice, and then keeps going out there to play. Are you considering potentially getting other backs involved? And he just kind of blew it off and was like, no, I like the way we've been using him. I'm paraphrasing, but it was just like, no, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing. So that's great news for Rico Dowdle fantasy managers that you can put him in your lineup as a pretty locked in top 12 fantasy option. Continues to get it done, find the end zone. He has just been a great revelation this season. So that's good. And on the Falcons side, I mean, the Tyler Algier, Bijan Robinson thing is so funny. I think people overblow it though. Bijan Robinson, you're never taking out of your lineup, and Tyler Algier, just a touchdown or bust flex option, a guy that could certainly blow up if we saw Robinson miss some time. But don't go crazy when you hear quotes from the team about how Tyler Algier is, one of the superstars that people don't talk about on our team. Like, they're just saying nice things about one of their players. Like, don't get too worried about the fact that he's going to eat into Robinson's workload or anything like that. But make sure that Algier is rostered, which we talked about on the waiver wire show, that he is not rostered in nearly enough leagues. He should be rostered everywhere because you can use him as a flex and because he has that upside if Robinson gets hurt.
I do think that he is a quality flex play in this matchup, though. The Panthers' run defense has been pretty good this year, although Derek Brown is a little bit banged up right now. But nevertheless, it didn't work out the last time that you thought about playing Algier against the Panthers because they scored 0.0 points in that game. They got blown out. But this one's at home. Probably going to not go that direction. But yeah, at least it's on my radar. It doesn't really matter for fantasy, but at least on my radar if the Panthers play Jalen Coker over Xavier Legette, because everybody's calling for it except seemingly this coaching staff is not ready to say enough already with Xavier Legette. But I would certainly like to see some more of Jalen Coker. I think he could help them out in the ways that they need. Last game here in this section, Cowboys at Raiders. I wanted to call this the Why Is This on Monday Night Football Bowl, but I'm just going to go ahead and call it the stoppable force versus movable object battle. And I think that just perfectly describes the Cowboys defense, which has been utterly movable. I know they're getting Damari, as producer Colin has yapped nonstop at us the last few weeks. They're getting Damarian Overshown back. That should really help. Obviously, Quinnen Williams is in the mix now. Logan Wilson is in the mix now. So there's a chance this Cowboys defense can go from abject disaster to bad. That would be a pretty big upgrade if those guys could just get them to that level. And even still, this Raiders offense is so brutal. But I do think we're overreacting a little bit to how, again, and myself included, I might be overreacting a little bit as well, how horrible it was on Thursday night, because that Broncos defense is great. So maybe we see some more signs of life out of Genty, Bowers, and the boys in this matchup here.
Yeah, I agree. I think I mentioned it before when I was talking about Trey Tucker. I think he's somebody you could get into your lineups this week as a wide receiver 3 flex. I don't think he's going to have a 3 touchdown game like he had earlier in the season, but we saw some 60, 70, 80-yard contests from him where I think he can do something similar to that in a great matchup here. And then, other than that, it's Bowers, it's Genty. And on the other side, man, you're playing everybody and you're excited to do it. Yeah. I think we're going to get a lot of points in this game. At least Vegas thinks so. So hopefully the Raiders can keep pace and keep that one moving. But not to hijack it with more 49ers news, but I don't know if we want to talk about it. Ricky Pearsall, It's confirmed. Ricky Pearsall is playing now. So not to totally destroy the no one's game segment where we're supposed to talk about games that nobody wants to talk about. Going back to that 49ers one, Ricky Pearsall coming back, Brock Purdy coming back. Very excited. And now, because I found out that you were the one that dropped Pearsall in that league, I can't wait to track the Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall of it all moving forward here to see if I got lucky that you dropped him or if you made the right move and that Jennings is the better play the rest of the season.
No, I don't think that Jennings is going to be the better play the rest of the season. I needed a win last week.
1 week. That was I know.
I did it for the 1 week, and I do think they'll be relatively close-ish. But yeah, give me Ricky Pearsall every single day of the week. He said, I just started feeling myself probably just this week. So yeah, very excited to see Ricky Pearsall back in our lives here. I love that we just completely skipped over the Cowboys offense, which is perfect, by the way, because that's one of the most fun offenses to watch and really boring to talk about for fantasy because it's like, yep, play all the guys and the ball doesn't really go anywhere else, which is kind of beautiful for our purposes. All right, we're going to take our last break. When we come back, it's time for the hurry up offense. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back, and it is time for the segment that is sweeping the nation, the Hurry Up Offense, where we put 40 seconds on the clock, and we force each other to answer some rapid-fire questions. So welcome to the Hurry Up Offense. All right, Boone, we got to be quick. Let's get into it. Let's get your first one here.
All right, I'll keep it simple. If you were in charge of finding the Giants' next head coach, who would you hire? Who would you bring in for a team that I said I think actually could turn it around very quickly? Is there somebody that you have in mind that you would like to see take over as their head coach?
I'll give you two options here. One, obviously, you got to call Clint Kubiak. You got to see if he wants to do it. You got to see if he can be a head coach. That's the first one. Second one, I actually don't mind the idea of Steve Spagnuolo as the head coach, and you keep Mike Kafka as the offensive coordinator. They worked together in Kansas City before. You keep some familiarity with Jackson Dart, and you get a guy that I think, obviously, again, knows the franchise and seems like a good leader. So that's my answer to that one. All right, my first question here.
I was going to say, I keep thinking they're going to attract bigger names, but all right, let's keep it going.
Wow, I mean, come on. What you want? You want Gruden there? Do you want Gruden or Lane Kiffin?
No.
How weird do you want to get? All right, my first one for you. Do you think you single-handedly motivated Bucky Irving to get back to practice when you suggested he be tossed into the coping corner for not existing for a couple of months?
Yeah, we shared some text on this one. Yeah, I definitely think we do. And I think we should continue to use this power if we can, right?
Yes.
Trey Benson, Omarion Hampton, get ready to be put in the coping corner next week if this is what's going to happen. We need these guys back for the stretch run. All right, that was a quick answer. We'll keep it going here. Currently, the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the 49ers are outside the playoff picture, despite being viewed as obvious contenders before the season. Which one of those teams do you think is most likely to miss the postseason entirely?
Ooh, probably the Niners, just because I think their division is the best. I mean, they're definitely a step behind the Rams and the Seahawks in that division, and their defense is a problem. That's the thing. As much as we can be excited about these guys coming back on offense, Nick Bosa and Fred Warner are not walking back through that door. So yeah, give me the Niners on that one. All right, for my next one, I mentioned to you my most personal frustrating fantasy team is this office league that we are in. What is your fantasy team that is frustrating you the most? If you can give us some quick details about it.
Oh, I might have already mentioned this to you at some point. I'm in a charity league that was organized by Reddit. There is a $10,000 prize that goes to charity, which is just amazing. And normally in charity leagues, I've done pretty well. And this time around, everything has gone wrong, Harmon. It's injury after injury. I drafted James Conner and Trey Benson to lock down one of my running back spots. They both got hurt. Who needs them, right? Jaden Daniels in and out of the lineup. I got guys like A.J. Brown that have underperformed. And I took Rashee Rice on that team, who for the first 6 weeks wasn't around and now is doing great. But also I was in a bit of a hole that I'm trying to climb out of. So that is an awful team that I hate looking at every week, but very well run league. The NFL back in Europe this week for the final international game of the season. That makes me think about like Europe, soccer. Have you ever thought about relegation in the NFL? If you were going to relegate two teams and bump them down, which two teams in the NFL would you relegate?
Oh my God. Well, the funny thing about that is that I would do it in a way that makes no sense, where it would be teams that are annoying me, like the Cardinals. I would relegate the Cardinals because they're annoying me. They're on my radar. And I also think, though, like, let's be fair. Let's relegate the Tennessee Titans. It's kind of enough already with what's going on there. They're probably going to ruin Cam Ward's career. So I think we can go ahead and relegate the Tennessee Titans on that one. But I think we should have some sort of punishment for poor performance, not just participation trophy. You get the number 1 overall pick. Enough already. All right. For my last question here, Boone, I bet you can't guess what I'm going to ask you. Would you rather have to go the next year knowing you will at some point once a month have to engage in hand-to-hand combat with a deadly assassin ninja type character, but you don't know when the attack will come within that month? It could be any moment. Or finish last in the rankings contest.
Wow. All right, so now we are fully putting my life on the line again.
No, you're not going to die. It's just,
I'm just going to have to engage. So it's all right. All right. I was going to take it like the dinosaur one where I still have a shot. I could still win. I'm still going to do that. I'm going to live with my head looking over my shoulder constantly. I am going to live in that little element of fear that at any moment I'm going to be attacked and have to fight. You still haven't found it, Harmon. I thought this might be the week based on how you guys were talking before the show, but no. I do not want to finish last in that rankings contest. I will take the constant state of fear and being attacked by an assassin.
I'm so trying to find it, but without being horrible to you in some way. Like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. We've got a few more weeks left of the season. We're getting closer. We're getting in the zip code.
Getting closer.
But there you go. That is how dedicated. If you're not watching us on YouTube, you have to watch this on YouTube so you can at least see the graphic they put together for Boone being stalked by an assassin as he's putting together his rankings. All right. That is going to do it for today's show. What an outrageous program for you that we had here today. Important to note, for those of you busy in the YouTube chat with specific questions, we have just the show for you. Every Friday, John Daigle goes live right here on YouTube at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. So make sure you check that out on our YouTube channel. Speaking of John Daigle, Chris Allen stepping away for the show on Sunday. So Daigle is tapping in here. The man himself joins me this week for the Sunday recap. Him and I are going to go live right as the late game windows end. So when those games, Broncos, Chiefs, Seahawks, Rams, they hit 000, you're going to join us right here on YouTube to recap all of that. Until then, we are out.